On our exploration of the north part of Isla today, we've come up past Bridgend and down a little narrow road to Isla Woolen Mill, which was first here in the 18th century, and then it was a linen mill, but it became a woolen mill in 1883 and continued producing all the woolen materials for Isla until about the 1950s, when it was closed. The mill was extensively restored by 1981 and since then has built up an international reputation, supplying royalty, film stars, people all over the world, and most impressive when you go inside and see what they've got to sell and how they're producing it. The textiles are woven on restored 19th century machinery, which can be seen producing the fabrics available in the shop, and they also retain rare textile machinery, including 2 spinning jenny machines and a slubbing billy, which are on display. They had some beautiful things in the shop, such a variety, but we decided to buy a knee throw, because to go over your knees when you're sitting down in the cool of the evening. So I shall think of Isla when I'm wrapping that round my knees. We have come up the road a few miles from the woolen mill to Finlaggan, which was the home of Somerled in the 12th century, the first Lord of the Isles. Isla today is on the edge of Scotland, but 1500 years ago it was the centre of the Argyll and Ulster kingdom of Dalriada, and it was a central part for the Irish missionaries, Christian missionaries coming over. And so the name Finlaggan comes from the Saint Finlaggan, who was a contemporary of St. Columba. The real significance of Finlaggan came with Somerled, who chose it as his seat of power. And people then wondered as to why he chose Finlaggan, because it isn't on the sea. And Somerled's main power came from being a tremendous sailor, because after all it was him who managed to get the Vikings away from Scotland. So it's been thought perhaps this was chosen as an important place because it is a secure place. The 2 little islands here, and it's not that far from the sea, and so when they would have landed maybe at Bowmore or along the sea, they would then go on horseback coming along here, where they would be out of sight of any enemies. Unfortunately, we can't get on the little island today because the bridge is being repaired, and it hasn't been repaired safely yet. But we're looking across to the ruins of where the main house would have been, and the chapel, and apparently there are gravestones there too. And beyond that, another smaller island was where the Parliament met. They did try to reconstruct the Parliament building on this little island, but it's starting to sink, so they had to take the buildings down. That's now, not back then. Behind me, the grassy mound there, which in actual fact is hiding the visitor centre, when the time team came down here in 2013 and they did some excavation, it was found to be a burial mound, and they found quite a lot of artefacts which are in the visitor centre. Another day, another distillery. We've come along a very narrow coastal road to Bunnahabhain, the most northerly and remote of the distilleries on Isla, and the only whisky which is not peated. Also, there are no pagoda towers here, so whether that's a connection We don't know. Bunnahabhain was established in 1881 and the name means mouth of the river, and the river is the river Margahale, which supplies the distillery with the water for its whisky. All the whisky distilleries had their own piers for transporting the whisky, but now it's done by lorries. But we can't imagine how they get along this narrow road that we've been along. I certainly wouldn't want to meet one coming the other way. We're looking across to the Paps of Jura there, and in the distance is Mull and Colonsay. It's an amazing weather today. We haven't bought a bottle of whisky from here. Perhaps we'll have to haste ye back. We're at Loch Gruinart, which is an RSPB nature reserve, because hundreds and thousands of birds come here throughout the seasons. The land has been farmed for 3,000 years. And it's managed now by the RSPB, so that after the summertime they can cut the grass after the birds have finished nesting. They cut the grass for the winter feed for the cattle, and apparently they've got sluice gates so that the water is managed too, because it's fresh water, even though we're right by the sea. We're walking through an ancient Atlantic woodland, and we can hear the buzzing of the bees and various insects and the wind in the trees. The air is very clean in this wood, meaning that it is full of lichens. What wonderful crooked and gnarled shapes these twigs make, and all covered with the lichen. And now the sun's coming out, it really brings out the colours. Here's the old man's beard lichen, which we were shown a picture of just back there. I've never seen that before. It's very descriptive. We've returned from the woodland trail and have come to the Lochside lookout, where at low tide the birds feed in the mudflats left, and at high tide they go over the seawall to feed in the freshwater pools there. We've spent an interesting couple of hours here, even though we haven't seen anything really spectacular.